1991. This is where Jeffrey Dahmer lived and killed.
It was like stepping into maybe the abyss. Here was a small apartment where the worst horrors that man could even conceive of took place. Jeffrey Dahmer got to me personally. Flurry Boyle, his defense attorney, asked me to testify on his behalf.
Mr. Boyle?
This nice, pleasant young man. How do you explain it?
Boyle wanted to prove that Dahmer was insane and killed during psychotic episodes.
I was intrigued. Was there actually an organized killer who lost control during the killing?
A young man led police to an apartment where he said Jeffrey Dahmer had tortured him and was about to kill him when he escaped.
They found, of course, skulls in the refrigerator, plus they found other remnants of human beings' bodies in a tank in his bedroom.
There were also big barrels of acid in which Dahmer was dissolving some of his victims.
He was piling up bodies in his apartment. He had body parts in the bedroom. He had body parts in the refrigerator. He had bones in file drawers. He had heads and skulls in vats of acid. Anybody that would have gotten into that apartment at that time and really looked around with some knowledge would have been horrified that they'd stepped into hell.
The private hell, created by one man, suffered by his victims.
I was very grateful to have the chance to interview Jeffrey Dahmer. He seemed so normal. He was likable. There was nothing offensive about him. You almost felt a kinship with him. And at the same time, what he was saying was enough to literally curl your hair.
Okay, tell me about that. I wasn't getting the satisfaction, so I took it to a new level. So after they were drugged, I would drill a small bore hole in the skull. And with a large syringe, it's used for basting. And I fill that up with muriatic acid, injected it in the frontal lobes, hoping to...
What effect did it have?
It didn't seem to have much of an effect. He woke up about 2 hours later, groggy, complaining of a headache. And so I gave him more sleeping pills and then strangled him.
And he believed by doing this he could create a person with no mind, a compliant sex object, but alive. He said that way I wouldn't have to get more victims. I could just keep the sex zombie.
Now, Ressler understood why Dahmer had to kill again, and again, and again. A perfect example of an organized serial killer at work.
Towards the end, Dahmer was no longer in control. He was just looking for the next victim and trying to clean up the last victim.
During Jeffrey Dahmer's trial, Robert Ressler was not allowed to testify. The judge rejected the insanity plea. Ressler is still convinced that Dahmer was mentally ill when he committed his crimes.
I felt that Dahmer was a perfect classic case of a serial killer. He was white, he was male, he was unmarried. Even though he can conform to law and convention on a routine basis, once he starts sinking into his fantasies and allows himself to do that, he reaches a point where he is now prowling, looking for a victim. The minute that young man was in the apartment and the door was closed, Dahmer lost it. At this point, he was driven, emotionally driven towards his end, and that would be sex with this unconscious and eventually dead individual. Dismemberment, cannibalization, all of these things would take hold. Dahmer was no longer able to step away from that.
But none of this made any difference to the families of the victims.
The case of Jeffrey Dahmer was special. He invited me into his mind, and suddenly the unexplainable became explainable.
The Bob Resslers of this world, if they're not careful, can very much slip into a very bad state of mind. What they are trying to do is a good, can really turn into an evil as far as they're concerned, because it can have the effect of changing their very spirit, their very essence. And it's a very fine line to walk.
The home of Lionel and Sherry Dahmer. Robert Ressler is still in touch with the father and stepmother of Jeffrey Dahmer.
I've raised 3 kids myself. It must be terrible to realize that you've raised a monster.
Like the Dahmers, Robert Ressler is still trying to find an answer to the question that is Jeffrey.
He had a small circle of friends. He participated in all kinds of activities through our urging: soccer, archery, Boy Scouts. We raised lambs together. But shyness, social ineptness, that was it. There were no signs that were made known to us. The roving around the neighborhood on his bike at about age 13 or 14, looking for dead foxes, groundhogs, whatever, was unknown to us.
I always saw Jeff, the lost child, the little boy. I saw the young, lost child.
When we sat down to talk, I was surprised to see how quick Jeff Dahmer opened up. I asked him his feelings when all this was happening, and you know, was he really enamored and into this sort of thing? He said no. He said it was like he was operating in a mechanical fashion, and it was as if he was looking down at himself and watching this occur. This is a clear indication of dissociation. Dissociation carried out to its end would be multiple personality disorder. It was like there were 2 Jeffs. One was into the horror of it all, and the other was standing back and watching. He said a lead blanket would settle over me, and I'd get this very horrible feeling of loss. His last victim told me that when he left, Jeffrey was in the bedroom, he was rocking, and he was chanting, and it seemed to be in some sort of a stupor state. When this young man came back several hours later with the police, Jeffrey hadn't budged. He was doing the same thing. Dahmer changed the way I looked at my entire approach to profiling. For the first time, I'd seen an organized killer who lost control in a psychotic episode. It taught me that not everything is black and white.
He had no knowledge at all why he was obsessed with these thoughts and these actions that he did. He had absolutely no clue as to why he did these things.
It gives you a broader understanding of the human beings that we rub shoulders with every day of our lives and who we truly don't know. We don't know their dark side.
Pain and confusion. The victims, their families, they know it well. And even the profiler is not immune to it.
Jeffrey Dahmer made me see the world with different eyes. A predator can be our own flesh and blood.
Alexandria, once again. The killer drove a knife into the chest of his victim 25 times. Finally, police arrest the Alexandria murderer.
When they caught Monty Ressler in Alexandria, I was ecstatic. At a point like this, it was very much personal gratification.
Ressler had noted that the perpetrator would be a young man, late teens, early 20s. Monty Ressler was 17. Ressler had predicted that the killer would have grown up without a father. Monty Ressler's father left when the boy was 7 years old.
Once the guy was in custody, I was a little surprised only about the age. At the age factor here, I thought that he would have been older. This is closure in a sense, working on something to the point where now you're going to put it away. But more importantly, I think, is the fact that you're now able to sit down with this individual to ask him